Howdy everyone, welcome to This Old Vegan. My name is Merlene Vassal, and in this video I'm going to talk about how I managed to write the first two novels in the trilogy, The Vampire and the Vegan, with the third book to come, hopefully early next year. Something else that I did was I tried to look at each chapter as almost a self-contained short story. So it had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And also I made sure that the chapters are not too long so that it would be easy for the reader to pick it up and say, okay, I have time to read one chapter, I have time to read two chapters, and not to have any chapters that were so long that someone would say, well, I don't have enough time right now to read this, so let me put it off till later. The other thing with keeping the chapters short was to my benefit, because these were the first, particularly with the first novel, but even the second one, I'm still don't consider myself to be an expert at this by any means, but making the chapters a bit shorter made it seem more doable for me to get through the novel than if I had several very long chapters. That just seemed overwhelming to me since I am not, as I said, an expert at this. The other thing that I did was I developed a routine for writing. I didn't write every single day, but I tried to write most weekdays when I was actively in the throes of writing the narrative of the novel rather than just in the thinking and planning stages. And I wrote my routine down because I would always forget what the steps were. So here they are. Well, this is not really a step, but one of the things that I would do is write first thing in the morning on the days that I was going to write, because that was when my brain would be the freshest, and sometimes I would even have ideas overnight. Sometimes I would dream about the characters, so writing first thing in the morning was good. It also prevented me from getting involved in doing other things and putting off writing until, the day was done and I would end up not getting anything done. So I wrote first thing in the morning. All right, so once I sat down to write, this was my routine. I would first review my outline so that I would have a sense of an overview of the story. And I will say I didn't finish the outline before starting to write. I would have maybe 4 or 5 chapters outlined because things would change as I got into the novel once I started writing things, and I would say, oh, this is a better idea, or oh, that idea just won't work. So anyway, I would start by reviewing the outline that I had written, and then I would research any questions that had come up. In there, for the most part, I was writing about things that I knew about already, but sometimes something would come up, particularly in the second novel where I'm looking into how animals are treated on farms and in the slaughterhouse and so forth. I don't have any first-hand knowledge of that, so that was something that required a lot of research. But sometimes there would be smaller questions that would come up that I didn't know the answer to. So I would take time right after I reviewed the outline to go back and research any questions that I needed to have the answer to work on the chapter that I was about to write. The next step is that I would review whatever narrative writing I had done the time before, usually the day before, and make any corrections or changes that I thought were necessary. And then that would lead me directly into continuing to write at least 2 or 3 more pages at a time. And as I wrote those pages, again, sometimes research questions would come up. I wouldn't stop to research. I would just make a note of what I needed to look up so that the next day that I was going to work on it, I could research the answers to the questions before I started writing again. The final note that I wanted to make about my process is that I used voice-to-text software. I used Dragon Naturally Speaking. I write for a living, and to do more writing in my off hours would mean a lot of keystrokes. So I decided to save myself from getting or exacerbating my carpal tunnel syndrome by using voice-to-text software. And something that was very helpful that I didn't expect was that the software that I have has a readback feature. So after I wrote something, I could have the software read it back to me. It was read in a computer voice, but that was still fine. I found that it was helpful to hear a different voice reading it rather than the voice that I have in my mind to see how it sounded. After I completely finished the draft, I reread it again to correct any errors or inconsistencies as best as I could. And then I had a group of friends and acquaintances. I asked my friends to invite their friends to read my draft. And then I had a little get-together where they gave me their feedback, things they liked, things they didn't like, things they thought were confusing, whatever thoughts, questions, ideas that they had. And I took copious notes on that so that I could go back and make changes where I felt necessary. Of course, I wasn't going to take every suggestion, but it was good to know what people were getting out of it when they read it, because sometimes you intend one thing when you're writing it, but it comes off as something else. For instance, in the first novel, one comment I had was it seemed like the vampire just really hated men, and that really wasn't the point that I was trying to get across. So I ended up adding in a female victim to show that it wasn't a gender-based animosity that the vampire had toward humans. Had I not received that comment from this person, I would have never known that that was how it was coming across. Good writing is really about, you write it out, but then you go back and look at it, catch your mistakes, fix them, read it again, catch any additional mistakes, and fix them. You're probably never going to get it to be perfect, but it'll certainly be a lot better if the more times that you read it critically and make edits. So anyway, that was how I wrote my first two novels. I guess I should mention that the reason it turned into a trilogy was because the first book is really about how the vampire transforms her thinking once she begins to learn about veganism and thinking about what it is that you eat or who it is that you eat. In the second book, Livestock, I wanted to focus on more of the societal issues around, the societal and corporate issues, business issues around how livestock are treated. In the third book, which I'm working on now, it's going to take place in a community where vegans are in charge, but there's still a few vampires lurking about, occasionally killing people. And so the ethical dilemma will be, how do we get the vampires to stop killing and eating humans without resorting to violence or oppression ourselves? So I think that will sort of bring the ethical dilemmas full circle. But who knows, maybe I'll come up with an idea for a fourth book, but kind of doubtful on that. So anyway, thank you once again for watching my video. Please leave your thoughts and questions in the comments, and in particular, are you working on a novel or thinking about writing a novel? If so, what's it about and at what stage are you? Thanks again, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next time. Take care.